You are watching this through a garden hose lying on the floor of the ocean. Not a metaphor. A physical object about 2 centimeters thick, unarmored, resting on mud 4 kilometers down, with nothing on top of it and nothing guarding it. Almost everything you think of as the internet crosses one of those. We talk about the cloud. We talk about wireless, satellites, signals, the air. And almost none of it is true for the traffic that matters. More than 99% of the data moving between continents goes through cables on the seabed, which raises a question worth sitting with. If everything depends on those, how are they protected? They are not. That is the whole story. Because the impressive part of this system is the part everyone writes about. The data rates, the lasers, the fact that you can pull a video from another continent without noticing the delay. None of that was the hard part. The hard part is that the thing carrying it cannot be reached, cannot be guarded, and breaks about 4 times a week. Start with the object itself, because the size of it is the first surprise. In deep water, a transoceanic cable is roughly 2 centimeters across. Garden hose. Inside that, the part actually carrying your data is a bundle of glass fibers thinner than hair. The rest is packaging. Steel wire for strength, copper for power, plastic to keep the sea out. Near the shore it gets thicker, wrapped in heavy armor, because that is where the danger is. Out in deep water, they stop bothering. Nothing out there was supposed to touch it. So the most important infrastructure on the planet is a thin tube on open ground, held down by nothing but its own weight. Getting it there is its own problem, and it is finer work than it sounds. Before anything goes in the water, ships survey the entire route, mapping the seabed along the whole path, looking for canyons, faults, and wrecks. Anything that would leave the cable hanging, because hanging is the thing you are trying to avoid. Then the laying. A cable ship does not simply drive along letting cable out of the back. It has to release cable at a rate matched to the ship's speed and to the depth of water underneath it, adjusted continuously for weeks. Get that rate wrong in one direction and you pay out too little. The cable goes down tight, stretched between the high points of the ground, suspended across the gaps like a washing line. And a suspended cable is a cable under permanent tension, sawing against rock every time the current moves it. It will wear through and fail years early. Get it wrong the other way and you pay out too much. The slack piles up on the bottom and loose cable does not settle into neat curves. It coils. It kinks. A kink in a glass fiber is damage, and you have just laid that damage under 4 kilometers of water where nobody will ever see it. So the target is a cable that follows the ground exactly, touching everywhere, tight nowhere, fitted to terrain the crew cannot see, from a ship on the surface far above it. Near shore, where the anchors and the trawlers are, they go further and bury it. A plow is towed along the seabed behind the ship, lifting a wedge of sediment, feeding the cable into the trench underneath, and letting the ground fall back over it, all in one pass. Depending on the seabed, that can put it several meters down, and that is exactly where the protection stops. Past the shelf in deep water, the cable simply lies on the bottom. Because out there, nothing was ever supposed to reach it. Now glass is very good at carrying light, but not perfect. Over thousands of kilometers, the signal fades. So every 70 kilometers or so, the cable is interrupted by a repeater. A steel cylinder, roughly the size of a person, spliced into the line, which takes the fading light and amplifies it. On a crossing of the Atlantic, that is well over 100 of them, and every one of those needs power. Which is where this gets strange, because there is no power station in the middle of the ocean. The electricity is pushed out from land, along the copper inside the cable, at around 20,000 volts from both ends at once. Each shore feeds half the line. So the cable is not just carrying your data, it is carrying the electricity that keeps its own amplifiers alive for thousands of kilometers through salt water on a single conductor. And here is the constraint that shapes every decision in the design. Nobody is ever coming to service it. There is no maintenance visit, no inspection. Nothing gets swapped out. Those repeaters are expected to sit under 4 kilometers of water and run continuously for 25 years without anyone touching them. You cannot build in a fix later. There is no later. Whatever goes down there is final. So the design problem is not really speed. It is designing a machine that will never be opened. But things still go wrong. And they go wrong far more often than you would guess. Across the world, roughly 150 to 200 cable faults happen every year. Call it 4 a week somewhere, constantly. You never notice, because traffic reroutes around the break in moments. The internet feels fine. Somewhere, a ship is being sent out. So what is breaking them? Here the popular answer is wrong, and it is worth correcting, because almost everyone believes it. Sharks. There is famous footage of a shark mouthing a cable, and it has been repeated for years. It is a good story. It is not what is happening. Over one long stretch of records, fish bites accounted for essentially none of the faults. Not a small number. Effectively, 0. The real cause is much more ordinary and much harder to design around. It is us. Fishing gear dragged along the bottom and ships dropping anchor. Between them, those two account for the large majority of all cable faults. Nothing exotic, no sabotage required. A trawler working the seabed or an anchor coming down in the wrong place and a continent's data path is cut. Which brings us to the actual question. The cable is 4 kilometers down. It is broken. Nobody can go there. How do you fix it? You cannot send a diver. At that depth, a human being is not an option in any form. And you cannot simply look. Visibility is nothing. The seabed is enormous. And the break might be anywhere along a stretch of ocean. So the first job is not repair. The first job is finding it. That part is done from shore before any ship leaves, by sending light down the fiber and timing what comes back. The reflection tells you roughly how far along the fault is. Roughly, not exactly. You get a stretch of ocean, not an X. Then a ship sails to that stretch and does something that sounds like it belongs to a different century. It drags a hook, a grapnel on a long rope, lowered to the seabed and towed across the cable's path at right angles until it catches. That is the state of the art. The most advanced communication system humans have ever built is recovered with a hook dragged along the bottom of the sea. But it is stranger than that, because of what the hook does when it catches. The first grapnel they use is a cutting grapnel. When it snags the line, the cable is dragged into a blade and severed. Read that again. The cable is already broken. The first thing they do is cut it properly, all the way through, on purpose. Because a partly damaged cable is useless to them. What they need is 2 clean ends they can find, lift and work on. So they deliberately finish the break. You repair it by breaking it more. Then the ends fall back to the seabed and the ship has to go and get them, one at a time. Second pass. Drag again, catch one end, winch it all the way up through 4 kilometers of water and attach it to a buoy floating on the surface so it can be found again. Third pass. Drag again, catch the other end, bring that one aboard. 3 passes minimum, each one a slow drag across the seabed, hoping to snag a 2-centimeter tube in the dark. Now the actual repair. And it is not what you would expect either. A new length of cable is spliced in. The glass fibers are joined by hand, one at a time, by a technician on a moving ship. That splicing can take 16 hours. 16 hours of precision work on hair-thin glass, on a vessel that is rolling over a hole in the ocean floor. And then, the whole repaired section is lowered back down, laid out along the bottom, and left there. That is it. That is the maintenance regime for the backbone of global communication. Find roughly where. Drag a hook, cut it deliberately. Lift both halves, splice by hand. Put it back. The fleet that does this work is small. The ships are old, and there are not many of them. When several faults happen at once, they queue. So when you look at the internet again, you are looking at several things at once. You are looking at a garden hose on open mud, 4 kilometers down, with nothing protecting it. You are looking at a line laid to follow ground nobody can see, tight nowhere and touching everywhere, because too tight wears it out and too loose kinks it. You are looking at more than 100 amplifiers per crossing, powered from shore at 20,000 volts. Built to run for 25 years because nobody will ever open them. You are looking at 4 breaks a week, caused almost entirely by fishing gear and anchors, and almost never by sharks. And you are looking at a repair procedure whose central tool is a hook on a rope, and whose first step is to cut the broken thing in half. You are watching this through a garden hose lying on the floor of the ocean. Nobody is guarding it, nobody can reach it, And when it breaks, somebody sails out and goes fishing for it.